Hi everyone, my name is Andrey Shumakov. I work in 1C Game Studios. It's a Russian game developer studio based in Moscow, and I'm in charge of game design on Caliber. The game has been in open beta since October 2019, and earlier this year we opened servers in Europe and Northern America. The open beta attracted enough players to grow steadily and let us develop the game on the go with the help of live feedback and flexible free-to-play monetization. My experience in development and live operations on Caliber are the base for this talk today. I think it may be interesting or useful to you if you're a game designer. It can help you decide which ideas you might want to try in your work and which ones to evade. To give you some more information about the game, currently we have 48 playable characters. All of them are divided into 4 roles. All of them are spec op operators from different units from all over the world. Currently we have 9 nations, including the Polish Grom, by the way. The game modes to play with all those operators are cooperative PvE, competitive PvP, and borderline experimental PvPvE mode. Initially, Caliber was more of an RPG than a hero shooter. Starting with the early prototypes, we've been constructing the gameplay around 3 kinds of characters. Obviously, the eternal triad, that is damage dealer, tank, and support. Testing and iteratively evolving our prototypes, we applied the weapon archetypes to the DD, tank, and heal triangle, experimented with flexible classes and in-battle development, and finally settled with the concept of a hero shooter with 4 obligatory roles and started designing the initial characters. 16 designs were considered to be enough for a start, and we started. We used integral parameters to describe the character's weaknesses and strengths. This is how we got to use the following graph: attack, defense, utility, mobility, and control. It would give only relative estimates for each trait, but that was just the tool for the job. Also, we called it rows of characters. That would bring some botanical mystery to the process.
The fighter's wheel provides a visual recommendation for each character's playstyle. Each of the wheel's parameters represents a combination of the fighter's characteristics, base stats, primary and secondary weapons, special items, and abilities. Let's give each segment a closer look. The damage segment represents how effective the fighter is at eliminating enemies. Fighters with a high value in this parameter are meant to deal damage to adversaries. The control segment represents the fighter's ability to inflict negative effects on the enemy. Disrupting enemy operations is the main role of high-control fighters. The aid segment represents the fighter's ability to help their allies by healing them or giving them boosts. The main role of high aid fighters is to help their allies fight more effectively. The mobility segment represents the fighter's movement speed. High mobility fighters should always arrive at the right place at the right time to quickly capture positions that are important to the team. The survivability segment shows how hard it is to eliminate a fighter. Fighters with high survivability should draw enemy fire to themselves. Range and complexity. Unlike the segments of the wheel, range isn't a qualitative parameter. It just shows the distance at which the fighter works best. For example, most marksmen have a high range. They're weak up close, but very effective at long range. Complexity represents how difficult it is to make full use of a character's abilities. A more complex character has the potential to be more powerful than a simpler one, but it's no simple task to fully realize their potential. That's everything you need to know about the fighter's wheel. Use the knowledge wisely.
On the one hand, this tool helped to create characters relatively fast. On the other hand, it left us with a few blind spots in the design that we've only discovered and fixed later in development. I'll highlight the top pros and cons of such tool. The pros: it's easier to suggest the downsides of the character you are balancing. It focuses the designer's attention on what is left unnerved and can evolve into strong and desirable perks. As always, constraints make you search for various ways how a character can compensate for its limitations. At this stage, we often had major insights into the future concept arts. I mean, if your character has, say, less than one mobility point, you should consider supporting it in the character art. Make it look fat or old or with less than a full set of legs. Cons of the character rows are that you can never tell how exactly the character will achieve the level of effectiveness you've assigned to him. For instance, how does high control value translate into potential DPS in an action game like Caliber? Imagine a character that activates his ability and hits a target into its head, causing it to slow down all movements by 75%. Now, what if at feet he would need to hit and a 30% slowdown instead? Well, trust me, leg shots causing a 30% slow are cancer in comparison. This is where prognosis may be failing you until people actually play it and gather more stats for you. And another downside of using the rows in initial character design is that it's too abstract. One of the initial 16 characters had an ability to cast silence on target when he hits it with a primary weapon. It gives the guy a few points of control and also sounds pretty fun, but it only works if the player knows the game, the resource he has, and how to put it to good use. Otherwise, you have a half-dead character on your hands. In our case, it took a while for silence debuff to become quite valuable, but it's surely shaking the meter today. That's how our Koshmar, the assault from Grom, deals with Matador, the recent hero of all game modes. He does equally good versus Bourbon, but that's a whole another story. Imagine you have a few dozens of characters in your non-pay-to-win hero game. Congratulations, you may even feel like you've achieved something here for a second, but then troubling questions start to appear. But there are basically two of them. Question 1, how come we made an overpowered character? How do I do now? Oh my god. Well, it would have happened someday. Don't be overly dramatic about it. In theory, you could release a character that would make players abandon the game like it's a sinking, burning ship. I truly hope that you would not do that, but if you do, please call me. Anyway, there are commonly used methods of fixing imbalanced characters. The only difference is which one you would choose. Option A, nerf the overpowered character. Yeah, I know it's so nice to feel so sure about your next fixes when both statistics and players' feedback are unanimous, but it's never the case. When we released our first character equipped with a bulletproof ballistic shield, some players just went nuts about how unbalanced it was. However, analytical data that we had did not confirm it. We simply didn't look properly. Bastion, the French support, was only armed with a short-range medium DPS automatic pistol, but it's the half-cover shield that made him scare every opponent when met for the first time. Built to withstand a frontal attack, Bastion was not a great damage dealer, but until everybody learned how to counter him, the best PvP players have made him a reputation of a slow, unstoppable killer. With an average win rate of less than 56, we had to make it lower than 50. Lower peak and win rates were needed to bring Bastion to the norm, so we nerfed him right away. We learned from our own mistakes, so later we changed how we gather and use data for rebalancing purposes. However, players' reception has never been unanimous, but I believe that's the only way it should ever be. Gotta add that the mentioned Bastion case has served as a lesson on how hard rebalance decisions can be unnecessarily stressful, both for the designers and players. One of the latest additions to the game's roster of heavy supports, Matador, has met a similar fate. This tough guy's primary ability temporarily turns on actual auto-aim, making him look like a total cheater for a few seconds. So players who manage to grind to get him earlier than others have helped to earn Matador the fame of another imbalanced killer. It took extra 3 or 4 days for the high and medium engagement cohorts to obtain it, but that time was enough for players to learn how to counter and quickly kill it using the abilities and weapons of operators that have been in the game for years now. Matador is not purchasable with premium currency, and it also helped its reputation, of course. Well, it was slightly nerfed anyway, but the story still confirms that you may need to wait for more statistics to accumulate to make calculated decisions. The negative side of the cold-blooded and mathematically precise nerf of an outstanding performer, they are minimal. It's a rational decision. Use it anytime you feel you need to. But remember, it's just never that easy. I'll name the other case the Stern and Volk situation. We've had this couple tearing apart the meter for several weeks with not enough competition. The support operator Stern has been loved for his rocket launcher and his ability to shield a targeted ally from some damage and mobility debuffs. Volk, being an assault, has been able to fire his AK with zero recoil and zero spread for a few seconds and mowing multiple enemies down per one use. A simple and effective PvP character, Volk has been in and around meters since closed beta test, until we decided to limit his powers. We've slowed him down for the duration of the damage boosting ability. So little we thought that we're only making Volk even more tied to Stern. The only character able to negate the other's drawback was another overpowered unit. Option B, create and release another overpowered character and let everyone have it. Truth be told, every game designer who did it imagined how magically the pick rate and win rates graphs come to senses and how players sigh in relief and thank community managers for the changes. Just do your best and don't release it as a paid DLC unless you're fine with pay-to-win models. But in general, that's a great way to make shifts in the meta. Players who's been dominating before the changes will dig into the update and adapt as soon as possible. Players scared off by your previous unbalanced creation will probably check back in to see if something changed or the game remains ruined. Anyway, a counter meta will form around this new hero, and the more synergy you add to this character, the better is the chance that the older top dog loses his positions in meta. A typical case of replacing someone in meta, Warren, the assault from Russian SSO unit. This damage dealer has been able to greatly limit mobility of his victims, making them lethally vulnerable. We pushed him off of the pedestal by adding a different assault, temporarily resistant to all mobility debuffs. However, this assault would also be resistant to any damage too, and postponing death for a few seconds if the ability is active. This addition weakened the meta of high control assaults and raised interest in those who can interrupt abilities. To switch off this character's perk, the character's name is Aphela, or those with the great damage output per single hit, to take her down before she has time to activate the ability. And this is when the era of so-called explosive meta started. It is in decline now, but it is still here in Caliber. And here I'd like to suggest option C too. If the problem of overpowered characters becomes really dramatic at scale, try the funniest and the busiest way of dealing with it. Introduce global changes to the combat system. Be sure we did that too. The armor mechanics were not there on the early stages of open beta, and adding it at some point along with further tuning along the way gave a huge push to override meta and gave extra variable for the next one to form in a less definitive way. Adding a combat use consumable that restores armor fueled variety in slow encounters, particularly empowering characters with high amounts of armor points. While those who rely on high mobility remain true to other consumables, armor became a must-have for most support operators. So supports got tankier and funnier to play. Marksmen with higher headshot modifiers became trendy. Medics discovered the courage to attack more frequently, and assaults began looking for the new top DPS. A new meta started growing, and we kept following it at all times. These are some of the ways of dealing with super effective characters. Now the question is, what should we do with particularly underpowered ones? That happens too, and to my knowledge, that's the sweetest treat that a game designer responsible for balance can get. We often use improving an operator as a tool that marketing team can find application for, but it works best if you microbalance it, not only pump up some numbers in the configs, but give the character what his gameplay needs and what the players want him to have the most. We had several cases of bringing operators closer to the meter. The one I'd like to mention is how medic called Karavai got his ability modified to give the players more ways to use it. Karavai's ability called Healing Capsule was given a rebound so it could be used off a wall to reach obstructed targets, and a static casting route when affects enemies. When more characters using fire damage appeared, we once again tweaked Karavai. The healing capsule started to cleanse friendly targets of fire damage over time. Another case is Rain, the assault from KSK, who started losing players' interest after a few newer assaults became available. We brought it to meta, not plainly increasing damage output of effective range, those were actually reduced, but by adding more opportunities to the players who pick Rain. His ability to cleanse enemies off of their positive effects was expanded, so it would also destroy hostile items within the area of effect. We sincerely enjoy giving old and well-known characters new ways to play, and that's also nice for the PR purposes. Everybody likes it when the devs take time to update the older content. But on the other hand, it's good to keep in mind that your game's community matures, learns about the game, experiments with it. It just may take some time. Once upon a time, we released Bard, the medic from SSO. It was a good shooter and a simple-to-use self-healer, but it was branded useless by the vocal majority. Healing was okay on paper, but turned out to be way worse than some other medics on the battlefield, according to the stats. Bard's secondary ability to reinforce the team anywhere on the map seemed too contextual and weak. It had to be used in specific situations that are only predictable if played with a pre-made team or when no one is shy to use the voice chat. In a few weeks, Bard's defensive perks and solid personal weapon and parameters made him a must-have in PvP meta. We didn't need to rework it or buff significantly. We've waited for players to find how to take the best of him and put it to good use. And to complete the talk, I'll say a few words about Bourbon, that character I have mentioned earlier. And him I use as a good example why chasing meta is a solid way to keep a game fun to play for everyone, even if it has potentially imbalanced characters. Bourbon stuns his victims by shooting at them and also kills them by shooting at them. He has been called overpowered more times than any other operator. He's become a local legend, but no one asks the devs to remove it from the game. It is an icon and an idol to compare the new heroes to. Of course, as alcohol tends to wear off, Bourbon will lose some of his charm over time, but I believe that his input in forming meta is invaluable. Guys, have Bourbons in your games as centers of gravity, and may the players not hate you for it. Thank you.